Puts me so much trouble, it's not my fault. All this I also lose my friends, I lost my baby. That is looking crack only today. Want to change, he wanted us, so they couldn't try more like to feel. I'd kill the real, take your life in a second. The table drinks coffee in my kitchen, I mentioned eating every song, I just wanted to go away. You decide to stay in the well. I want to be forgiven, I don't like this kid for money. Sorry I was scared, you're not the way it feels. Like to sleep waiting for someone to come in and kill you. The final thing is that now I'm not afraid of anything. Cause they gonna kill anyone that feels so powerful. They try by you every your skin of everything is confusing. You will be good but you will be more. You will be good but you will be more. You will be good but you will be more. Alone every day it is a praise of pleasure.
Good morning and welcome to Dynasty 365, where the film will set you free. Today we're going to be talking about the situation surrounding A.J. Brown in Tennessee. At wide receiver, they've got Corey Davis, who is very good and still definitely the number one target out of the receiver group. They also added Adam Humphries this season, who was a slot guy for Tampa Bay last year and had kind of a mini breakout. I think he's definitely an above average slot, and they just paid him, so he's most likely going to be seeing the field in that position for the foreseeable future. They've also got Tywan Taylor, who they drafted to be a slot, but because of inconsistent play, it doesn't seem like he's too much of a threat to A.J. Brown for snaps. He'll get some to use his speed, but I don't think he's developed the way they hoped he would. They also have Tajai Sharp, which everyone should remember from his preseason hype his rookie year. And although he's athletically limited, he will still get some targets as a chain mover, possession type guy, but shouldn't affect A.J. Brown too much. Everyone else on the roster are Jags. At tight end, they've got Delanie Walker coming back off of an injury, who's a stud when he's healthy and a target monster. Behind him, they've got Jonnu Smith, who's developing. I'm not sure if he's ever going to be something, but it is hard to tell with these young tight ends that don't get a lot of playing time, but I personally don't have very high hopes for him. At running back, they've got Derrick Henry, who's rarely been targeted in the passing game in the NFL, but he did show some receiving ability in college, so it is possible that he could get a few looks in that area in the future. They also have Dion Lewis, who everyone should know is an exceptional pass catcher. So just with the receiving weapons, Corey Davis and Delanie Walker are clearly the top targets. They just paid Adam Humphries, so he's probably at the worst tied with A.J. Brown in target share. But then they also have Dion Lewis, who they're going to give looks in the passing department as well. At quarterback, they've got Marcus Mariota, who has flashes of brilliance, but he rarely stays healthy. He really hasn't developed the way you would expect a number one overall pick to develop, and I do think the amount of coaching turnover and offensive coordinator turnover combined with a lack of game experience due to injury are factors there. He was pretty inaccurate last year, but he did have a nerve injury in his throwing arm, reportedly pretty much the whole season. The reports are that he gained weight to try and prevent injuries, which was probably a smart move, but it's still unknown whether or not that will help. The team also added Ryan Tannehill to the roster in an apparent attempt to motivate Mariota, which was a smart move on their part. One, because of how often Mariota gets injured, and two, to kind of send him a message that he needs to pick it up. Their passing offense was fourth to last in passing yards per game and fourth to last in passing touchdowns per game last year. They also had the second fewest passing attempts of any team in the NFL. The offensive line was ranked 29th in pass protection, and in the run game, they were 17th in creating yards for the running back. They were middle of the pack in every other run metric, but they did add a guard in the third round. But I don't think a third-round guard is really going to change the entire offensive line very much. The Titans were 23rd in yards per drive and 9th worst in points per drive, while weirdly having the 9th best time of possession per drive, which is explained by their run-heavy play calling. They were the second most run-heavy team at 51% of their plays being called a run. Their defense was actually pretty good. They allowed the 7th fewest yards per game, the 3rd fewest points per game. They had a middle-of-the-pack rushing yards allowed per game, but had the 6th fewest passing yards allowed per game. They were 9-7, so it's not like they were getting blown out, leading me to believe that they have an issue stopping the run but not the pass. In the draft, they did add a first-round nose tackle in an apparent attempt to help stop the run, Jeffrey Simmons. In the 4th round, they added a strong safety, Amani Hooker, who's a name to really monitor in IDP leagues, as right now Kevin Byard, who is a stud, is their free safety and gets a lot of their tackles. But part of that was because they've had pretty bad strong safeties for the past couple of years, and now the only person in front of Amani Hooker is Kenny Vaccaro, who's been underwhelming. They also added a 5th-round edge rusher and a 6th-round inside linebacker, so they definitely spent most of their draft capital on continuing to shore up the defense. That makes sense with head coach Mike Vrabel, who of course was a linebacker for the Patriots, who's in his 2nd year as a head coach and is defensive-minded. The most concerning thing about their coaching situation is that it took them most of the year to figure out how to utilize Derrick Henry correctly. They also have a new offensive coordinator who is doing the job for his first time, and last year was the assistant tight ends coach. So not even the tight ends coach, but the assistant tight ends coach is now the offensive coordinator. And I believe Mariota has had a new offensive coordinator every single year of his career. Now, A.J. Brown himself, I do like. He was my pre-draft wide receiver 6. He is 6 feet and half an inch tall. He weighs in at 226 pounds with 9.75 inch hands and is 21.85 years old, which is on the younger end of this wide receiver group. He is 1st in all wide receivers in weight divided by height, 3rd in span divided by height, and 8th in hand size divided by height. He ran a 4.49 40. He had average jumps. He put up a whopping 19 reps on the bench. And while he didn't do it at his combine, at his pro day, he ran a 6.89 second 3-cone drill. That one result is what propelled him from my tier 2 wide receivers to my tier 1 wide receivers before the NFL draft. But yes, on film, that means he was not in my tier 1 wide receivers. The good things that A.J. Brown brings to the table are good route running skills, but not great. Good sideline awareness. He can find the soft spot in the zone. He can make the first guy miss with his back turned to him. If you've seen any highlight films of A.J. Brown, you should know exactly what I'm talking about. He has good spatial awareness of where other players are on the field in relation to himself, and he does have good long speed as shown by the 4.49 40. The bad things I saw in film for A.J. Brown were no athletic separation, average acceleration. He runs tall. He's not a good blocker, which is kind of concerning in an offense that calls the 2nd most running plays in the NFL. He lets the ball into his body too often. He has drops in all situations, wide open, contested, high point, hands catch, and body catches. He's shown drops in all of those areas. Not a ton, but he does show that he's not this elite hands catcher that many would have you believe. He's also fairly scared of contact, routinely showing fear of the defenders, which is concerning to me when you are the biggest wide receiver for your height in the class. And on film, he has a low route tree diversity. So what does all of this information mean for the draft status in your rookie draft of A.J. Brown? Well, he's on a run-first, bad offense with question marks at quarterback, head coach, and offensive coordinator. He's behind Corey Davis in targets and likely Delaney Walker, and instead of playing in the slot, where I believe he should be played in the NFL, he's relegated to primarily the outside because of Adam Humphries. He could easily be 5th or 6th in line for targets when you factor in Dion Lewis in year 1 on the NFL team that was 2nd to last in number of passing attempts per game. To me, fantasy is about finding the intersection of talent and opportunity, and that's not very many opportunities. Does he have upside for the future? Absolutely. But simply due to the nature of the offense and all of the question marks surrounding his situation, I believe his price will almost certainly be lower this time next year at rookie drafts than it is right now. Avoid A.J. Brown in the first round of Dynasty drafts. It's simply not worth it. You can love the player as much as you want to. I clearly don't like him as much as many others, but he did make it into my tier 1 wide receivers pre-draft. Wide receiver 6, 4 spots higher than Cole 101 pre-draft. However, the situation does matter. The context does matter. Cole got Patrick Mahomes in the most exciting offense in the NFL right now with a huge amount of targets being suddenly vacated. A.J. Brown landed in a run-first team with pretty much established receiving options and a ton of question marks about the guy throwing the ball, the line protecting for that quarterback, the defensive-minded head coach, a first-time offensive coordinator that was an assistant tight ends coach last year. Do not pick A.J. Brown in the first round. Just do not do it. It is almost certainly a losing proposition. Of all the players I'm being seen drafted in the first round right now, I'm most sure about his value going down over the next year than anyone else. I know some of you probably have your heart set on him. You've been following him closely. You've decided he's the next Juju. But Juju was in a vertical pass-happy offense with a guy that just threw for 5,000 yards last year. The Titans had the fourth fewest yards per game and touchdowns per game in the passing arena. A.J. Brown is a landmine. Avoid, avoid, avoid. Today's advice is about balance. A lot of people have the question, which of these three things are most important to look at in Dynasty? Is it the analytic predictors, the metrics, or is it the film? Or should we disregard both of those and only look at draft capital? The answer is yes. You need to use all three of them and find the right balance of those three to make your final rookie ranking. If you rely on just one, you're going to be missing what the other two methods can help explain to you. On film, I had Kelvin Harmon and Riley Ridley in my Tier 1. The NFL Draft said they don't have enough upside, so I had to move them down my rankings, but I know from the film that they're still guys I want because I know I like what they do on the field. I know they have a shot of producing year one because they already have the technical skill, or very close to it, required to beat defensive backs in the NFL, who have a much better level of technique on average than college cornerbacks. You also look at the analytic predictors, like hand size. If someone has small hands, but a virtually identical profile to a guy who has big hands, the analytical predictive models have told me bigger hands are better, so you lean towards the guy with bigger hands. But if you only use one of those methods, you are limiting your scope too much, and you will miss out on value in your rookie drafts. In my opinion, the analytic predictors are used to limit the available pool of players, because think of how many wide receivers there are playing just Division I football every season, and how many levels of football are there? Division I, 1AA, 2, 3, NAIA, that's a lot of players. So in my opinion, the predictive models are used to limit that field, but there are always individual players that don't fit the model. Relying only on the model will limit your field of players too much. I also believe that film shows their actual skill level and their chance of having immediate production in their first year. And over my couple years of experience looking at how the player looks on film compared to where they go in the NFL draft, I firmly believe that draft capital shows their future potential upside and their opportunity and leeway they'll be given with that specific team. And other NFL teams who will try to develop that player if for some reason he doesn't fit that team or they get a new system, other teams will trust that draft capital for a much longer period of time than if it was a 6th-round pick. The single most important thing that is the most under-talked about area of Dynasty is the context. The context of the player. What's the situation surrounding him? We talked earlier about production happens when talent meets opportunity. Well, that context is the opportunity. That draft capital is opportunity. The scheme is opportunity. The available targets is the opportunity. The play-calling tendencies of the team is the opportunity. The talent is a combination of the film and the draft capital that teams tell you what this player's potential is. When you're analyzing a player, ask yourself, what is the situation? What's the situation surrounding this player? And then you need to prioritize or learn which of these things affect his production. I see a lot of ranking slaves online, which is funny to me because 1, those people firmly believe they're correct, but 2, they didn't actually make that decision. They're just following whatever the consensus ranking is. So they're super prideful about quote-unquote their decision, yet they didn't even make that decision. They just listened to someone else and decided that's truth. And that's what they're going to fight for, is someone else's opinion and treat it as if it was their own decision. You do need to hear the consensus, 1, to see where these guys are going to go in your drafts, but 2, to see if you are making a mistake. There are some players where after a second look, after seeing some consensus opinions, where I realized, I probably was being a little too harsh on him for that, and kind of opened back up my mind to the possibility of selecting that player. The single greatest piece of advice for any new Dynasty player is to make your decisions. Don't follow consensus rankings, especially not consensus. If you find a brilliant, just upstanding, all-around great Dynasty analyst like myself, feel free to pay him $5 a month to learn his rankings and how he operates that are updated weekly. Now that's fine, but your decisions are now your consequences. Even if it's a shitty decision for your team and it ends up biting you in the ass, you're far more likely to learn from that than look at the expert consensus rankings and pick the next player. I don't think it's possible to get better at playing Dynasty by blindly following expert consensus rankings and just trying to screw people over on trades. I honestly don't even think that's the most efficient use of your time. Trade negotiations take forever, and most of them fall apart. I'd rather beat people in the rookie draft and get the players I want for my team. So for better or worse, I still learn from that decision. This weekend, I had a difficult decision to make, and I drafted Mecole Hardman over my Broncos Noah Fant and Drew Lock because it was the right call. It sucks that he's a Chief, but my Dynasty team needs to win more than I want to hate a player. I can still hate him, but at least now he's going to be helping my fantasy team win. I did go through the download stats, and I do think it's pretty cool. I mean, you know it's the internet, and you know it's connected to everywhere in the world, but to still physically see the map with all the different places where people are listening to this from is still pretty mind-blowing to me. So I want to say a special thanks to North Dakota, Nebraska, Mississippi, Washington, D.C., Iowa, Minnesota, Louisiana, Illinois, Missouri, and Massachusetts for being the top 10 highest listening states per capita, and also wanted to thank California, New York, Texas, and Florida for being pretty big listeners as well. But honestly, I just want to thank everyone listening. This is pretty cool and fun to me, and I do honestly believe I'm right. So we'll just have to see what unfolds during the season. But I proved my process to myself last year, and now I'm hoping to prove it to the world. And speaking of the world, it is also pretty cool. I've got some listeners from Canada. Britain, or the UK, is actually way more voluminous than I thought it would be. And then also I've got some from Ireland, Germany, Italy, Turkey. That's just crazy to me. Anyways, if you want to support the show, head over to Patreon. You've been listening to Dynasty 365, where the film will set you free.
So much trouble, it's not my fault. All this I also lose my friends, I lost my baby that was looking crack. Only today want to change. He wanted us on the cougar and try more like to feel. I'd skill the real, take your life in a second. The devil drinks coffee in my kitchen, I mentioned in every song, I just wanted to go away. You decide to stay in the well. I want to be forgiven, I don't like this kid for money. Sorry I was scared, you're not the way it feels. Like to sleep waiting for someone to come in and kill you. The final thing is that now I'm not afraid of anything. Go they gonna kill anyone that feels so powerful. They trip by you and your skin up, everything is confusing. You will be good, but you will be more. You will be good, but you will be